Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming today. We are going to jump right into all the things that we have going on this time of year. So let's move forward to, I'm Andrea Augustine. I am on the board of the Scottsdale Parent Council. I'm one of the VPs. Kim is sorry she was not able to be here tonight, but let's get started here. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. We'll do our land acknowledgement. As we gather for this meeting, let's take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SPC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Akimel Odom, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. All right. All right, let's jump into Q&A with the superintendent. We had a few questions that came in. If you don't mind me jumping on those. Let's see what we have.
We're sharing a mic.
Oh, right there. Yeah. All right. All right. Okay. The bond, popular question. Is SUSD moving forward with a bond in November?
So we will know the answer to that question likely in May. So the governing board at the April 28th study session will spend time looking at the data with respect to what the needs are. And we have Dennis Rayler met with at least twice at each building with staff and with parents. He's got more than 50 site visits to talk about what the needs are. Plus we had a facility assessment done. And so he's going to share the information about what the need is. And we're also going to review the data from a pre-bond survey that we commissioned with Noble Predictive Insights to get a sense of where our voters might stand with respect to a bond issue. The results of that survey are pretty favorable and in some respects maybe exceeded what we might have thought as we're having conversations about closing buildings. But we even asked about that. You know, are people aware? And how do they feel about that? And actually, a very large percentage was aware and agreed that it's the right thing to do. And when they were first asked, would they support a bond if an election was held today, you had 70% yes. When you give more information, it went to 73. When you give actual dollar amounts, the number changed a little bit. So it's very helpful to see kind of how it might be framed. And then the board will have the study session on the 28th. With a plan of taking action on May 12th. The county needs the ballot language by June 8th. We had initially thought we'd do a May 12th and June 9th presentation, but since the county needs the language June 8th, we've moved it up a bit. So we should know May 12th.
All right, sounds good. Where can parents find information about this?
After the 28th, it will all be posted on our website.
All right, perfect. Does the district have any oversight role for cell phone use in high schools?
Well, we have policy in the Student Code of Conduct and an expectation. So when you say oversight, we rely on our building administration to ensure that we're following the policies established by the board and codified in the Student Code of Conduct.
All right. All right. What is the district guidance that governs attendance warning letters, especially when they are sent following an absence because of illness? Should kids not stay home from school when sick if they already have absences?
So there are a couple of things here. This is it's never perfect. So we know attendance is important. We've been stressing that ever since we got back from COVID, and you see nationally the issue of chronic absenteeism. And the data is very clear in terms of correlation related to achievement on standardized assessments and attendance. And so you can see those patterns. And so we work really hard to encourage attendance. We've also worked to address the tone of the letters that go forward because we want to encourage students to come to school. So we work on that. That doesn't mean we always hit the mark, so sometimes we can miss it. And we should be always aware of if someone has legitimately been ill, we want to wish them well and hope they get better, while maybe giving gentle reminders about the importance of school attendance. And so there's a way to get to a both and. Sometimes if you have just an automatic that gets processed, those one-offs that might have a really good reason might get missed. And so appreciate you flagging it.
This is a three-parter. Is SUSD thinking about selling any assets or properties? If so, which ones? And what can be done with funds from those sales?
So the board and the city of Scottsdale have both signed a letter of intent for the sale of Main Street. We'd be selling, the city would be buying. I still think that they're looking at a June final approval. I was hoping they'd do it a little faster. But that's one building that we know, and when it's a sale to the city, it doesn't require a vote of the people. But for any other district asset, if we're going to sell it, we first have to get authorization from our electorate. The board has generally not expressed much of an interest in selling our assets, but that doesn't mean they wouldn't be willing to look at it. So it's possible that they may want to put the sale of one or more properties on the ballot in November as well. Getting authorization to sell doesn't mean you have to sell. And so if you get the authorization, then if and when the timing is right, you could move forward. And I would just say, for instance, there are two properties that haven't been used for school purposes, school related, but not for us for a long time, Cholla and Apache. And so you might want to get authorization to consider selling those. But if you sell property under current statute, that goes into plant fund and can only be used for capital expenses. It can't be used for maintenance and operating expenses. When you lease, depending on who you're leasing to, it may have to go into plant, but it could also go into M&O, and so you get a little bit more flexibility. The biggest risk in selling property, especially the buildings that are impacted by phase 1 and phase 2, is that while in the next 10 years, demographic projections don't show that we're going to grow, that doesn't mean in the next 20 or 30 years you don't have a cycling. And those assets could be really, really valuable, and we also don't want to be short-sighted in terms of the future of the district. Next year we'll celebrate serving the community 130 years, and we certainly hope to do that for a lot longer in the future. So we want to make really smart decisions for the next generation of students whenever they come.
Okay. Are there any questions out here? No? Okay, there was one more over here. Is there a setting in the emergency notification system that will just notify parents once if they have more than one student enrolled in a school? Phone, text, email?
If they're different levels, so if you have an elementary kid, a middle school, and a high school kid, they don't want 3 notifications?
I mean, I think in this case, the parent was asking about if you have 2 students in one high school, are you getting double notifications for everything? And you are, and I guess they were wondering, is there a setting that will only notify them once?
Well,
so they're
that may
not
be
like
an opportunity for us to go to Parent Square with another improvement to their platform.
So I have 2 kids in one school, in an elementary school, and I don't get.
You only get one?
I only get 1. I do, like, when you guys send out, like, the source or something, like, I get it at both schools, but it's not like it's.
But not for an emergency one. Okay.
Okay.
So we'll have to see and make sure that it's streamlined. We don't want anyone to get inadvertently missed, but I can understand how it would be if you had a lot of kids in one building. Getting multiple could be a little overwhelming.
You get lit up. Okay. And well, if that's everything for Dr. Menzel,
Thank you all. I
Thank you
appreciate
so
you being
much.
here. And look, you have an audience.
a captive audience.
We could actually break into small
You
groups,
cannot
one to
leave
one.
the doors. The doors are locked. You cannot know. Thank you. Okay, and I believe Dr. Bono will be speaking on behalf of Dr. Crone. Had some feedback questions?
Yes. Hi, I'm Christine Bono. Did you guys hear me?
Well, we need it for the recording. Please.
Oh, sorry, recording, sorry. So Christine Bono, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary and K-8s. So I'm playing a couple of hats. So Shannon Cron's daughter is getting an award at her school at Cochise tonight. So she wanted to provide just some feedback to hear from you all. And I think what we'll probably do is I'll talk to Ms. Cron about getting this sent out more widespread, but you don't have to provide your questions today, but in case you do have feedback. The first question was regarding the code of conduct. When you read the code of conduct, what parts feel clear and easy to understand, And where do you feel more explanation or examples would be helpful? So as we make changes every year, there is a change, and we won't go into too much detail now about it, but regarding, if you recall, that front of the code of conduct has a lot of that opt-in, which isn't really, code of conduct is disciplinary, and there's a lot of perfunctory documents in the front. I know we're changing that to separate them out, but as you think about all the nights you have spent reading our code of conduct, getting to know it on a very personal level, what might you feel about getting either more clarity or explanation on?
Any feedback? I'm just throwing it in really quick. Yeah, I'm just throwing it in really quick. Sounds like there'll be another opportunity
Yes,
to share.
and what we could do even for our next meeting, if there's an opportunity, is provide some, we would call it independent practice in the classroom, where we could have some computers or people could look on their phones and we could give you little tasks to say, how easy would it be to find XYZ on this, right? So if I'm a parent and I want to hear about the cell phone away for the day, where would I find that? Or the dress code, or the attendance. Some people will say, what do you mean there's a law about attendance? Where might that all be captured?
Okay.
Her other feedback was, when you hear about a discipline situation involving your child, what helps you feel confident that the outcome was fair, even if you don't have information about other students involved? So as we talk about disciplinary, maybe your child was either, because all kids make mistakes, they were either the perpetrator in something, or perhaps they were a victim, for lack of a better word, in a disciplinary issue or concern.
I only know their perspective.
Yeah.
I only know it from my child. So the admin will tell me, I'm handling this, and here's what happened with your child. But I don't think I ever come out of those conversations feeling like I know what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I think just to your point, that's even what I was thinking when I first read this, was that communication piece, that I can hear it. Like I always say, when I was a principal, I would say, so I can't tell you who was involved, but your kid's going to when they come home in 10 minutes. I can speak to the big picture. I can't speak to what Johnny did, but I can probably provide some additional context. I think just knowing you've got that two-way street of communication, but we will make sure we send these questions to you and you can send them out to the members.
Great.
To capture some more feedback.
Okay.
Anything else about the code of conduct or discipline or anything regarding anything under that kind of umbrella?
All right.
It was easy.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, we'll send that out and get more information and feedback. All right. Let's jump in. Let's see. Whoops. Here we go. All right. So we are going to talk today about site councils, what they are, why they're important, what they do. And let's see. Yeah, you already have the
I'll
mic.
pass
If
it
you
around.
want
Yep.
to just
I'll pass
introduce
it around.
yourselves, that
Yep.
would be wonderful. And then we can jump into some questions and learn about site
So
councils.
we'll pass the mic to do introductions, and then I'll provide an overview and then give each of our principals an opportunity to talk about how they use their site councils.
I'm Dr. Janelle Dansky. I'm the principal at Arcadia High School.
Hi, everyone. Amy Hardy, principal at Mountainside Middle School. Shout out May family.
I'm Kelly Perry, school principal at Yavapai Elementary School.
So again, with the small group, we'll be a little bit less formal, but basically the statute that is about site council, and I won't go too far down the rabbit hole of the ARS and Arizona's state statute, but there's ARS 15, anything 15 is like school, public education related. 15351 talks about that you have to have a site council. So there's the tight and the loose. So you have to have a site council. It kind of provides feedback on who should be on it. The statute doesn't say you need to have this many parents. It just says you got to have some teachers, some parents, non-certified employees, community members, theoretically, which we'll talk about, students if it's age appropriate, like at a high school, and the principal of the school. And it kind of paints with a broad brush. So when we'll have each of our leaders kind of talk about that. But the main reason that the state says we needed to have a site council was when we talk about tax credit and there's all these different pockets of money. But the undesignated, which in our world we call it the general extracurricular. So for example, when my kids were in Scottsdale schools, I'd write the check and I would say, this is for fine arts, or this is for athletics. If I didn't put anything, it went into that general extracurricular, and as a principal, I couldn't use it without getting my site council permission. At the elementary level, and Kelly can talk a little bit about this, it was mostly field trips, although there is a field trip account. So while the main purview is that general extracurricular, no one up here is going to tell you that they make decisions in isolation. We will rely on our site councils for so much. They're kind of like our cabinet. In SUSD, they've modified the guidelines. So our state, we have our board policy, and as I went down the rabbit hole, actually, our board policy is not completely up to date with our practice most recently, so we'll be reaching out to our legal guidance just to say, hey, we want to make sure that our practice matches our policy and regulation. So this opportunity kind of gave us a chance to make sure everything was aligned. So our policy is,
Well, and to just give you some reference, this tax credit funds, it's funny, today is the last day to contribute to that, isn't it? The
no,
April
they
15th?
changed it. So
Oh.
it used to be, so you can, yes, be with the control over what year you give. So you can give it
Well,
for
yes,
next year or
of
the
course.
last year.
Well,
You can
yes.
always give it, but
Yes, yes. Well, yes, yes.
for tax year.
Always give.
Yeah, for tax year 2025.
Correct. So for the, yes, for
Yes.
2025, today is the last day, $400 for married couples, $200 for individual.
Correct, and we always talk about that it's not a donation, it's an actual credit. So if you have any tax liability for the state, it comes right off that. And if you owe, it comes off that. If you're getting a refund, it would be in addition to what you are getting back.
Just wanted to
So-
plug it really quick.
Yeah, thank you. So board policy CFD talks about school councils, and it provides an outline on you using your site council as shared vision for curricular decisions. Are the membership got a little bit more, not restrictive, just a little bit more higher, more tighter parameters. So our board policy says 3 parents or guardians, 3 teachers, a non-certified employee, and a community member and the principal. And these ladies will give their input. When I was a principal, getting a community member was the toughest. We would always advertise it in our notes. We would say, community member not able to be, we didn't have one available. It was myself, Mrs. Jennings, who sits up front here. At that time, she was my assistant, so she was our classified member. And then we did a rotation. So they typically serve like a 3-year, 2 or 3 years, and we staggered it. So we didn't have a whole new council at once. So it's very clear about who's on it. And I'd love to hear Janelle talk about a little bit about your makeup with high school, and then we'll kind of answer the questions you've asked us.
I have a few more just because we've got 1,700 kids. So we have 5 parents and then 5 teachers / one of those is a classified staff member, and then I have a community member. It is tough to get the community member. We finally have a former parent whose student is long graduated who said, I will be your community member, and I'm so grateful for that. So they serve in 2-year terms, and so half turnover each year. It helps to have some continuity.
And to that point, every school has their own bylaws. So I know as a principal, we established our bylaws, we used consensus. For example, if I had a teacher who was also a parent, our bylaws were very clear that you couldn't serve in the role of a parent if you were also an employee. So there's the tight and the loose. The tight is the state and our board policy says, here's how you have to do it. The loose is your bylaws, your terms and whatnot. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the makeups of your site councils?
Sure. We're very lucky at Mountainside. We do have a lot of parent and community involvement. And then one thing we did this year was we had some parents that were very actively starting to be involved with clubs. So for example, pickleball club. So we put those parents on the site council. That was a win-win for us. And then I will share, as far as a community rep, I know that's been a struggle, but we have our Charles representative as our community member. they're active and they really want to be involved in the school, and it was our duty to have them see what's going on and be an active voter in our funds because they contribute to those funds. So that was one way we met that this year.
Stealing that idea. The same, we have parents, we have staff members, we have classified staff members as well as certified staff members. Make a point that if you are funded through one of the tax credit clubs, that you come to the site council meeting so that we can ask, so that anybody can ask questions about what's going on in your club, and just get updates. So it really does help provide transparency on how our tax credits being funded, and parents just want to know what's happening in the garden club. So we have the same makeup as well.
I forgot to add, at the high school level, our student body president serves on the site council as well. It's really helpful to have the student perspective.
And in our district, when we talk about teachers and staff, or teachers primarily, certified staff, getting professional development hours, or this committee is a district committee, so staff who participate can get, like, I think if, the statute best practices meet once a month, so they can get, 9-10 hours of horizontal move a year, which kind of helps kind of sweeten the pot because it is a commitment for the teachers to participate. One of your questions was, I believe it was the role of the site council and the decisions, and so we'll go around and talk about, because everyone does something a little different. I know when I was a principal, the two biggest things our site council helped determine was our field trips, because it used to be where, because we use those tax credit funds, we would approve every single field trip, and it became really tedious. So as a site council, we decided, what if we took our tax credit and we divided it up by grade? So every grade got a set amount. So I think back in the olden days, it was $1,500. So if you had extra money, and I as a principal would approve, if you want to go, like we had one grade level, they'd love to do a hike free. Transportation was pretty nominal. And you wanted to take the bus because we write letters to the senior citizens at the assisted living, and you want to go meet with your grand pal, great. But if it cost money, you want to go to the zoo or you want to do something else, that was your one grade level field trip. So we always made sure grade levels took at least 2 field trips. And again, that was just what we decided. And then the other one was looking at how we optimized our time. So parents would say, and teachers would say, I have so many students who receive special ed services, and that we have IEPs every single night that sometimes go till 5 or 6. There's got to be a better way. So our site council put our heads together and we implemented something to get parents' input, to get teachers' input, and we implemented on a Wednesday. So on Wednesdays were our IEP days. So teachers, I usually hired one sub that rotated. So if Kelly was a teacher for a student who had an IEP, that sub would cover her class for an hour, would cover Amy's class, and it really maximized the time. And teachers benefited from it, but it was a nice input from everybody on that committee. Do you guys want to just talk about maybe some decisions your site council makes?
So at Yavapai, we're a Title I school, so we actually have a standard of engagement that we aspire for and are actually held accountable for if we are receiving those federal funds. And so we use our site council to go through our school improvement and action plan. And it's a great way for our site council to understand what a Title I budget looks like. We do share that, what those funds are going towards. Most of it is staffing, specialists and things like that. And so we actively seek their input and ideas and feedback. So we, as a Title I school, use it for that. We also use it for, as already stated, our tax credit clubs. So we have before and after school clubs that we run, and we are, again, transparent. Trust and transparency is really kind of the hallmark on what we want our site council to think about. We want to show our community that we trust them enough to show them everything, and we are transparent in all of our financial handlings of taxpayer, money. So we do the clubs, we show the budgets for that. And then we also ask for approval. So anything that we need for the club will go out and we will ask for a vote. So we want to make sure that everybody who is on that site council has the ability to approve those funds. So as Dr. Bono said, it is not just one person overseeing this. This is definitely a collaborative process. And then the last one that we use it for is field trips. Again, everybody gets a field trip, and if they're free, that's great. Then we only have to pay for the bus, but we want every grade level to have a field trip. So we really use it for 3 things.
Okay, so this is for Mountainside Middle School, and just a couple examples that we have used our site council to vote for this year is for tutoring. So one thing in middle school is students want more independence, but they're not always responsible with their grades. So we want to set them up for success before high school. And so we have implemented before and after school tutoring. And so we pay staff members to have the tutoring in their classrooms. And so our site council will vote to approve the amount of hours that we're going to pay teachers to cover those hours before and after school. That has been a big success for us this year. And then same as a lot of the other campuses for field trips, band and orchestra, they like to go on big trips out of state. They do a lot of fundraising for those, so we approve those trips, and we also oversee how they're doing their fundraising and try and make things easy for parents and coordinate so that everyone's not doing a different fundraiser all year. They'll do things together, and we talk about that as a group so that it impacts the campus in a proactive way.
One thing also I failed to mention was my last year, our site council was instrumental in our A+ application. When we went through the A+ and we received the A+ certification and the award, the site council was like tedious on that application. Even though many teachers and classified and parents had their hand in it, the site council was really instrumental with going through it with a fine-tooth comb. So that was another task.
And jump in at any time if you guys have any questions. You know, a couple of things that came up for me was wondering about, you know, the type of decisions that you make and things that you vote on. Is it just the financial decisions that the council votes on, or is it just the financial tax credit or anything else?
I can speak to that.
Yeah.
So our site council has 2 functions. One is an advisory body to the school improvement goals. And so I shifted our meetings to quarterly longer. We meet for an hour and a half. It was just a little more meaningful. We could have a longer discussion, but then I actually had real data to present that we could discuss about. So the first meeting of the year, we take a draft of the continuous improvement plan and then discuss it. And they give some feedback. And this year we did make some changes. They had some great ideas. And then I scheduled the meetings after the dates that we would have the data that we could discuss. The second part of that is they do oversee the general tax credit fund, and those are voting items. In order for us to spend the money, we have to have a quorum established in the bylaws, and then that has to be voted on. And at the high school, we do get a substantial amount of funds. I do quite a lot to go and fundraise, send that out to the neighborhood associations. We've got flyers. We email it out. You know, it's free money for everyone. So we've traditionally used that money. We do free after-school tutoring. We have between 50 to 75 students come in the library 4 days a week. We do 6 Saturday schools, which is just a longer study. Come get help from your teacher. We have about 80 kids come to those right before grading is due. We have funded college visit field trips for students whose maybe parents can't take them. Sometimes we help small clubs who don't have boosters. You know, you think like our football has a giant boosters and baseball, you know, but our esports club and our small engine repair club don't have boosters, and they serve predominantly students who are lower income, and so we've subsidized and purchased things that way. We've also done larger projects. We did a workshop for the robotics club. So one thing, you know, that's notable, a project that I worked on starting a couple of years ago with our lobbyist is the law had sunsetted that allows site councils to spend tax credit funds on capital. And so our lobbyist kept persisting long after I had given up and got that extended for 4 years, which is a big deal because we were then able to, like, I bought some work tables for our small engine repair club, and I couldn't have done that without that law being changed. So we're
So
good
that's
for
good
a
to
few more
know.
years.
Is that so it can be used for capital then now for 4 years from now? You said, or are we in the first year?
It was about a year ago, so yeah,
Okay.
another 3 years, and then
Okay.
we'll just have to do the whole thing again, you know. But this is why there was a governing board meeting, if you watch them, where there's question about why do we spend money on this lobbyist, but in that one single move, she paid for herself. Just the ability to release those funds and use it for kids is monumental, let alone all the other things that she's doing for us, so.
A question about I heard you mention both more than once, the school improvement and action plan.
Yeah.
Does every school have one of those? And are they always presented and discussed at site council?
So every school will have their school, continuous improvement plan, their SIP. We love acronyms in education. So our CIP, for the past few years, we've talked about our WIGs, our wildly important goals. So it's usually a math WIG, an ELA WIG, an attendance WIG. And so it's really important to review that. And I know they all have kind of alluded to it as well. When we get our state testing data back, that's not my data, that's our data. That's the first thing we're digging really deep in. And that helps, the site council helps drive that. Even if they're a layperson, to be able to look at that data and go, oh, well, have we ever thought about doing this? Or my kid goes, I have another child at another school and they implement it this way. So I really think it's just using them as a sounding board. One thing, this is just an anecdote. There was a leader in our system who was only with us for a year, many, many, many years ago. They are no longer in our system. And this was when the state first released what we call RFB, results-based funding. It's now expired, but this is going back about 10 or 12 years ago, where the state said, if you perform at a certain level, you get some money back. So some of our schools in our district got a lot of results-based, some didn't get any, and it went on for about 4 years. And as a group, when we were all deciding, how are we gonna be deciding to use this money? The law was tight and loose in a little bit. The state said, that money is for the school. So much will go to the district, but it's for the school to decide. They'll get a chunk in October and a chunk in May. And really the only parameter is you gotta use it to continue something that's working well. So if you do after school tutoring and you need money, you could use that. Or if you wanna hire an additional assistant in the classroom, even though it's tough to use it for personnel because it's not forever money. And we were sitting with our colleagues, and 99.9% were like, oh yeah, I'm gonna talk to site council. And there was this newer person who was not new to leadership, but new to our system. He's like, well, I mean, what would we even do? I said, well, why don't you talk to your site council? And he just went, psh. We need to use our site councils. And there's a reason why probably he maybe wasn't as successful. You don't make decisions in isolation. None of us would ever make decisions, especially when it relates to money. Even though we could, there's nothing to say we couldn't. That's just not best practice, especially in our system when we have so many people who want to be part of the solution, who want to be collaborative. So does that help?
Yeah, do site councils also make curriculum decisions?
Not decisions about curriculum. They might ask questions about it. And I'm curious to hear what the different levels. So they might have input when we talk about it. And I think we've talked about this in parent council in the past. The difference between our first best instruction, our curriculum that we use, our adopted curriculum that we use 80% of the time at least, our supplemental things we might use occasionally, and that also has to be approved through a process through teaching and learning and our curriculum folks, and then an ancillary material. You don't use it all the time, but we might have a parent who's on site council to say, hey, I know you guys use AR, so in elementary, if you're familiar, accelerated reader, can we talk about that? And I have one kid who loves it, one kid who doesn't. So they're not so much making the decisions, but they are asking just clarifying questions about it, especially when we talk about IXL or some of our newer programs, especially this upcoming year with the new math adoption. I would imagine, because my site council parents, I would contend we would all say our PTO parents, they're the folks who are in the loop. They're talking to people on the football and the Little League fields, and they might come and say, hey, I have a question for one of my neighbors. They don't understand what this new curriculum is all about. well, that's a great idea. We need to make sure our site council can speak to it, especially not only just curriculum, but any of our initiatives with that elevator speech. They're the people on our front lines. But do any one of you talk about curriculum with your?
No, but I was very sorry. I forgot to mention that general tax credit funds can only be used for extracurricular activities. I get that question a lot.
Could you explain the parameters of that too? Because I know it's like after school hours or before school hours, all the different parameters that you have to follow to use those funds,
Yep.
please.
So for extracurricular, the non-restricted tax credit. So when you send in your $400, if you don't put anything into it, like I said before, it goes into that general extracurricular. In order to use it, we got to answer 3 questions. Does it happen outside the school day? So is it extracurricular? Could we assess a fee? And could that fee be waived if necessary? So here's a great example. Many of our schools do homework club. So I had families as a principal who they had to go to work, if drop-off started at 8:20 in the morning, but they had to be at work at 8. Well, and I used to be the director of community ed overseeing Kids Club. It's a great program, but it's expensive. And if you only need it for an hour, it's really expensive, right? Because you're paying for the whole month. So I had a lot of colleagues that were doing this homework club thing that started at 7:30. Teachers ran it. They got paid by the hour. So it went from 7:30 to 8:30. And for kindergarten through grade 5. And we could answer all those questions. So is it extracurricular? Yep, it happens outside the school day. Could I assess a fee? Yep, I could say to the kids, it's $5 a kid. But could I waive that fee? Yep. And so I was able to use tax credit, that extracurricular tax credit, the general, to pay the teachers. I couldn't buy T-shirts. I couldn't buy snacks. Sometimes, some principals might have gotten a little creative to say, we're doing an extracurricular, this is back in the day before we had laptops, we're doing an iPad, we're doing like a graphic design club, and we need to buy the capital materials. Now this is going back 15 years ago when the rules were a little bit less clear. And so we were able to use some of those funds to purchase the equipment we needed, but we were also able to use that equipment during the day, right? I don't think that so much happens pervasively anymore because we follow the rules. But again, you would never make a decision in isolation. But those for the general extracurricular fees, those are the 3 questions we have to ask. So the couple ways. So the question was, how do field trips, where do they fall into? And then we'll go back to the curriculum question. So if you write on your tax credit, check field trips. It goes in the field trip. Our assistants, when it's time for site council, I know what Mrs. Jennings would do for me. She would print out my ledger, and it said, here's how much you have in general extracurricular. Here's how much you have in the gifted account. Here's how much you have in field trips. Here's how much you have in fine arts. And at the high school, I'm sure the list is 10 times as long. I always would tell parents, put it in general extracurricular because A, there's more oversight, and we get more bang for our buck. So I can pay for anything out of general extracurricular, but I could only use that field trip fund for field trips. But I could pay for field trips also out of general extracurricular. So I usually had, and at Redfield, where I was principal, we're not a title school. At that time, we did have the highest number of free and reduced lunch for a non-title, and we didn't capture a whole lot of tax credit. Not as much as some of the schools that were either had far more financial resources, or like my family, my parents would always give to like the Title I schools because they thought they needed them more. So we were always kind of that middle. But I would usually have, let's say, $2,000 in field trips, $14,000 in general extracurricular, and that's what, as a committee, we decided how we were going to use that. We never wanted to use it all, because we never know what it's going to come year to year. But we would also be very creative in how to advertise. So we had our postcards. We advertised at all of our Thanksgiving lunches, on all of our tours. We had kids advertising, tax credit to their grandparents for grandparents' lunch. So lots of different ways to get creative.
You mentioned field trips, but then mentioned paying for buses separately. Can buses,
That's part of it.
Oh, buses.
Yeah,
can
it's
be,
part of
you
it
can
because
use
that's
those
part of our
funds for
field trip.
buses?
Yep.
Oh, okay, good.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you guys want to go back and talk a little bit about curricular? Any discussions your site councils have about curriculum? Does it ever really come up?
No.
No. Yeah.
Okay. But sometimes you're saying principals will use the site council just as kind of an advising board.
Especially if, like, for example, with
Or
our new
sound.
math adoption next year, that might be a question to say, hey, if I have a parent who has a kindergartner and another parent who has a fourth grader, I might say, what are you hearing? Like, what, you know, not to be like my ears on the street, but like, what questions might you have about this new curriculum? Because we only know it from one, especially that first year of how we're implementing it. We get lots of questions about homework. Again, it may not drive our work as a site council, but I'm always grateful when we keep those lines of communication open, especially with our parents and our community members who are on the committee.
Speaking of those lines of communications, how can parents bring an issue to a site council? Is it just a matter of finding a representative and then trying to talk to them, or is there a way directly?
Yeah, it would probably depend on what the topic is. So for example, if a parent says, I don't like the code of conduct, that wouldn't really be site council's purview. I would always say start with your principal and let them decide, because sometimes it could be where we've had parents reach out and say, I'm new to the area and I own an XYZ company. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna put you in touch with my parent organization, my PTO or my APT or my whatever we're calling it, PTA, and see if they can, maybe you guys can partner or collaborate that way. We might have someone, we have a lot of snowbirds in the area who say, I'm here for 6 months, I'd love to be a volunteer, how do I become a volunteer? Well, that really wouldn't go to site council. We would explain that process and if they want to come volunteer and read to the kindergartners or whatever.
That community member that is on the site council, I know that our high school site council uses like former PTO presidents or that whose senior have graduated and then maybe are willing to come back. One question too about who sits on site councils for the high school level, have you ever talked about involving the boosters in some way so that they, because so much happens at the booster level at high schools, so would they ever be included in site council?
They would be included, but typically they don't because they're so busy. It is really a lot of work to be a booster. For example, our football team brings in over $100,000 per year that they're funding for the team. That is a significant amount of time on top of being a parent and working and you know, all of that. And so typically tend not to cross, but it's more just the scope of what it means to be a booster.
Well, but even the smaller boosters, you know, like cross country or something like that. I mean, I just wonder if, because they are so involved and so much money's involved in what they do for the campus, if there was a way to incorporate them. It's not required, I guess, based on, but just they seem like they would be an important voice, you know, on the campus. But
One thing that made me think about our tax credit was, as a parent of 2 kids in the district, I was very confused about tax credit and how to use it for field trips. And I agree with what Dr. Bono was saying, where I just give to the general fund, and if everyone did that, we could cover a lot more field trips as a group. But it's a little confusing because you want to attach it to your own kid. But it gives us a lot more reign if everyone just gave to the general, because then we would have field trips completely covered.
And also, sometimes you might have like great Aunt Sally who means well, and she's writing on her check, this is for Amy Hardy. This 25 can only be used for Amy Hardy. No. No. So we work on that. Or they'll say, this is for the art teacher. All right, well, you tied my hands a little bit. I can put it in extracurricular art, but what might that look like? All right, when she's doing her art club after school, or the gardening club, or, you know, yes?
What's the percentage of parents who donate or community members
Ooh, that's a good question.
what's the percentage of parents that donate?
that actually give?
So the question was, what's the percentage or the amount, the participation rate of tax credit? That's a very good question that I'm going to ask our student activities folks and our finance folks, and I'll report back.
It depends on the activities that are happening. So the high school, working at the high schools, they do big trips, they do bigger things that the parents will try and cover that. But the smaller schools, I've noticed just going to middle, is that there's just not a lot. There's a lot less parents that donate because the field trips are like $10. So they just usually pay cash or a check for that, and there isn't really a lot of demand for like that 400.
But it does go to so much more than field trips.
It
and I guess
does.
that's an education thing.
It does. That's one thing I wish we could promote more.
Yeah. You want to talk about, like, I'm thinking of like band and if you're in a band or athletic parent,
Yeah, so we've got over 30 tax credit accounts. It's a lot, and I monitor all of them. And community members can decide, I want this to go to the tennis team, or I want this to go to, the band, or I want this to go to pay for my students' participation in the AP tests.
Well, and that's the
you
high
know.
school level, just to be clear. The elementary level has maybe 2 or 3
Very-
buckets, but high
Very
school.
different, because there's a lot of fees when it gets to be at the high school. And, there are some tax credit accounts that are very useful and we need money into, and we'll always perpetually use band. Is an example. It's very expensive to do band and to pay for the buses and the transport and all of that stuff. I get a lot of donations into our art tax credit. I have 0 art extracurricular activities. So there is a provision that when that account is not used for 2 years, I can roll the money into the general tax credit account, which I did. I had about a decade of principals who didn't know that I followed, and I rolled over 25,000 from that account. And there's some groups that get a lot of donations. Tennis for the love, it's just, who knows where these people are coming from, tennis lovers. But we do put that money to use, and since you can accumulate it, we can use it for larger projects for some of those teams.
When we also had, like, for example, as a principal, when I had preschool on my campus, those kids can't take field trips, but we could bring something to them. We could use it to bring the Arizona Puppet Theater, or, and then similar to what Dr. Dansky was saying, when our preschool program for 1 year closed, that money was able to then be rolled into our general extracurricular. Also, one thing that comes up often, and we work with our finance department very closely, let's say the band, the choir. So SHAP choir this weekend went to Disneyland. Parents will say, well, they're going to Disney, I can use my tax credit. Well, you would think we could use part of it because it's a school event for like the choir concert. But our finance folks work very closely to say it all can't be, if you're just going to Disneyland, you can't use tax credit for that. They have certain rules for the fun crushers, and they'll own that badge. But it's the state law that says, no, it can't be 100% used. And I'm looking at Josh. Josh was an athletic dad. He just came back from a trip. Many parents probably use some of their tax credit allocation for that, but then the school carries the burden for the rest of that. Did you? Yes.
And the other part of the accountability is everything has to be in the notes, in the agenda, and it needs to be noted that it was approved. And when you purchase these experiences, the field trips and so forth, you do have to submit that to the finance department, and you have to submit the notes, and you need to show that it was voted on and approved. So there is a very tight checks and balances that we are obligated to follow, and they will let you know if you missed something and then you're scrambling to get it. So it's really good to get that process down with our admin assistants.
Well, and that was one of the questions too, is how can parents find out what is discussed or decided at the site council?
Yeah, we'll talk about the open meeting law, but also going back to, I used to joke to my site council is, I can't just buy a pony. Even if there's funds that are unrestricted that I can use any way I want, there are 7 layers of going through all the red tape of our district, which I'm grateful for. So even if one person says, yeah, Bono can buy a pony, there's gonna be 3 people at finance saying, what club is this? And then you got risk management going, you're not putting kids on ponies. Like, I'm being glib when I say that, but even if we don't have to get site council's permission to use it, there are 85 checks and balances, which I'm grateful for. But in terms of the open meeting law, yes, we are subject to open meeting law. So you might have someone who says, well, I want to come see your site council. You can come. You're not a voting member, but you're more than welcome to come sit in the room and participate.
Is that right? That's open to all parents
Yeah.
who want to? Okay.
Yep, and nothing we say, I always tell site council, nothing we say is confidential, so we don't talk about students, nothing that's federal protected information, anything that's FERPA violated. So we never say anything in here that's in site council that's confidential. We might be talking about data or we might be talking about fleshing out a process that isn't fully clean, and so if someone were to hear a snippet, it could be misconstrued, but we are very transparent. So to Kelly's point, in the old days, when I was a principal, before we had websites, specific to the school. Mrs. Jennings kept her site council notebook on her desk. So if someone walked in and said, "Hey, can I see the minutes?" Absolutely, let me make you a copy. Now, theoretically, they should be linked on schools' websites, because we have changed our websites over time. Even I'm like going on just picking random departments and seeing where there could be some opportunities to clean that up. So that's our next step, is just making sure that within those 3 days, either the link to the minutes or that the community knows where they can get it. There's no rule that says it has to be posted, but they just have to know they could go to the school and get the
Oh,
minutes.
so it doesn't have to be.
It does not have to be posted on a website. It's just that it has to be readily available should someone ask.
Okay. And who oversees site councils? Is that the principal?
Principal oversees it, but I would be a fool if I didn't tell you that probably every one of our admin assistants, I know my admin assistant, in terms of helping create the agenda, pulling the numbers, similar at high school. Dr. Dansky does it all herself. But in terms of taking the notes, I know my admin assistant would take the minutes. You guys have anything different? Pretty much same? Yeah.
They do all the process, the POs and everything.
Okay, and so all the members, are they elected or appointed?
Oh, I'll start with that. It depends. Now, I have never had the pleasure of having so many people who wanted to be on site council that we had to have an election.
Some schools do, I know some
Which,
schools do.
that's a good problem to have. So for at the elementary level, the more the merrier. If we had 3 third-grade teachers that wanted to be on it, I could get a bigger table. Go with God, like, let's have a big party. So it didn't say you could only have 10 members. Did you guys ever have an opportunity where you had so many people?
It's such a challenge. And so what we do, and what I personally do, is I invite people to consider coming on board, and then when they come on board, we put it up to a vote and say, you know, I would like to nominate, and the person knows ahead of time, of course, that we would like to nominate you, and if you're interested, we'd love to have you join. It is a commitment, you know, so I do explain ahead of time, and then we do put it to the committee to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and we've never had a problem with that.
I would say I welcome anyone who's interested, and then the teachers I volunteer them. I say, "Oh, thank you so much for volunteering to be on site council this year. We look forward to seeing you at 7:15 on Wednesday."
So
and they
they're
show up.
appointed by the principal then, the teacher, the staff?
Yes, I would say.
I always said if on our evaluation, and let's say highly effective was the highest, and I forget what it is now, but I would say it's a really highly effective thing to do. No problem if you can't, because ours are after school, and you've got childcare, and you know you've got people who work second jobs, unfortunately. But I would say it's a very highly effective thing to do if you want to participate. The one thing we did vote on, or in my school we didn't do voting, we did coming to consensus, was everyone had a role. So there was a timekeeper. Okay, who wants to be the timekeeper this year? Who wants to? Someone would say, "Can we bring treats?" Yep, you're the treat bringer for this meeting. So everyone had a little role to play. But in terms of the high school, how do you decide? Or
I generally have just enough teachers volunteer, but we have more parents that are interested, so I do hold an election. What I do is just do a email me. I put in my newsletter, email me if you're interested. We have this many seats this year, and then I send a Google form out to the parents for a vote. It always feels really awkward to do that. I guess it depends on how well connected that parent is or is not. But yeah, generally I have like 5 people run for 2 spots.
What role, okay.
Has it been that competitive?
All 4 years that I've been doing that? All 4 years. I am really surprised. I echo that, yes.
I would always put it out in our newsletters. Hey, we've got 2 spots open, so it's either like usually 2 spots or 3 spots. We've got 2 spots open next year. Let me know if you're interested. And for me personally, over 11 years, it was very rare that I was able to have a parent who wanted to stay on it for 2 years. They usually had to bow out for whatever reason. Life gets in the way, so then we would just fill them up, fill that spot mid-year.
It may be a bylaws question, but so how many years does a parent serve? Is it in the school's bylaws?
It's in
or
the
is it
school's
standard?
bylaws. So like for us, I think it was 2 or 3 years. I think you said yours is 2. 2, yeah. So it was up to the bylaws. And then we just usually, we have to submit our bylaws at the beginning of the year theoretically. Best practice would be just to have them on hand. And always, and that was our first meeting, was reviewing the bylaws with all new members and coming to consensus on, is there anything you want to change? So for example, there was one year where we could not get any parents who had the opportunity to want to participate. So we did have to change it where if you're a teacher and a parent, that one year we could make that modification. So that's the tight and the loose.
Because if you're not or if you're an SUSD employee, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like if you're a teacher at the school, but you're also a parent, you would theoretically be serving as a teacher, but we made it where, or consecutively, if you're on it 2 years as a parent, now can you be a teacher for 2 years? And if the group came to consensus on that, that's great.
Okay. And also for serving, what role do students play? I know at the high school level, students serve on the council. Which students, how do you choose them?
It's the student body president, and she has voting rights just like anyone else does.
Okay. And I know,
Full-fledged
I
member.
believe at Desert Mountain, they try to have a representative from each grade level, so 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. And then as far as the elementary level, do you ever bring students in to speak with the council?
We would bring our student body president just at the beginning of the year so they could be introduced. It's also good to public speak, like this is the group. So while we have our PTO executive board, we have our PTO parent group, this is our site council that's kind of like what we would call our cabinet. And they help us make decisions. And as a student, if you had a magic wand, what would you want them to know? And they might say, well, our bathrooms aren't very clean, or we want more recess. And so, we talk about what does that look like in terms of the instructional time. Sometimes parents ask about well, what's the law about recess? And so some of those questions that come up, but we don't have students that participate as members at the elementary. Do you have at the middle school?
We sometimes have students that have proposals to do fundraisers and assemblies on campus, and so we do direct them there. We had some students for their community project this year that wanted to do an assembly for the American Heart Association, and they wanted to do a heart challenge with our community. And so we did ask them, come in and present your idea, because not only is it good for them to practice those skills of speaking, but we want to spread the word, and that's how you get the word out, is you got people in there that's their job. It's talk about it, let's share.
I do not, but I also have another leadership group on campus, and that is student council will participate in that in terms of feedback, but not necessarily site council. So, but it's a great idea.
What other questions did you have?
Yeah,
I'm
does
just
anybody
looking.
else have any other questions? Yeah, let me come over out to you guys.
So you mentioned some schools get less money
Yes.
than others. So then they could potentially have less clubs or homework club or whatever. Are there other sources of money that site council can use?
Yeah. Not so much site council. So the example I will give is, so at Redfield, my goal was always to get $50,000 a year in tax credit. We never broke 40. But I never stopped dreaming and hoping and wishing and praying. So for example, once we allocated through site council, we did it big picture, small picture. So the beginning of the year when we'd vote on field trips, okay, we have enough to allocate $1,500 per grade level or $2,000, or we have enough for homework club, for gardening club, for tutoring. If there were other things we wanted, so let's say for example, different positions that it wouldn't fall under tax credit, it wouldn't fall under results-based, we'd use our PTO or our gift funds. We were lucky that we would have community members who say, I don't need the tax write-off, but I've got a couple $1,000s that I want to gift to the school. So they would gift it, they gift the money, or we would have our parent organization say, I want to buy new security cameras. Well, they're not going to they can't buy the cameras to give to us, but they can gift us the funds, and then we work with them. We have to get it approved through our finance. They gift the money, and then we use that to be stewards of how they would like it spent. But in terms of other things that we would use tax credit for, like I would never not do homework club. I would find a way to find money for that. So maybe through, back in the olden days, we had a little bit more purview over our rental fees. Picture day money. We used to have vending machine money. I would kind of piecemeal. We all got really good, I'm sure, at finding money to make sure everything was covered.
If you had a homework club, could parents pay for that?
Yep. So what we would say is for a homework club, it was $50 a student. but we could waive it. And we were very fortunate because we had the tax credit. If we didn't, we did have parents who would say, for $50 for the school year, that my kid for an hour a day we usually started at mid-September until like the beginning of May, oh my gosh, done. Yeah, and then that would go into either tax credit, they could pay that $50 into tax credit, and they would say homework club, or they could gift us the money, we could use it that way,
Okay,
if they didn't need the tax write-off.
right. So parents can donate directly to the school?
Yes.
Okay.
We often, this time of year, and this is not related necessarily to site council, but we would have parents who would come in very anonymously at the holidays and say, I'm gifting a couple $1,000s. I want this to go to kids at needy. And I would usually, in that case, direct them to PTO, or they'd say, I'm going down to the cafeteria and I want to know what is the balance for all the unpaid lunch accounts, and I want to just pay them off. But they'd say, you can't tell anybody I'm doing this. It happened every year, where someone would say, what's the balance? And we're going to take care of everyone's fees.
But if you donate directly to the school, then you don't get, if you
Correct.
donate directly to the school,
Yeah,
you don't get
that
the tax
tax,
benefit.
yeah.
So.
Or some people would have their businesses, if they own a company and they need that benefit for their company taxes, that would not go through tax credit, that would also just go through gift typically. And then they would handle it with their company. We could write them a letter saying they gifted X number of dollars.
Any other questions over here? No, we didn't
Did we
cover?
forget anything that you all wanted to add?
No.
Burning or otherwise?
All right, well, that was very informative. Thank you so much for all of that. That's good. I learned a lot. And I've sat on site council for a while, so I'm happy to learn so much about it today. Thank you, everyone. Let's do a little housekeeping here. Let's see here. I don't think we have any rep announcements or board updates. The big thing right now is that we are looking to fill our executive board positions. We have nominations open through April 17th. It's a good group of people every year, and you learn a lot about the district, and you make a lot of good contacts. It's a really wonderful experience. If you know anyone or if you're interested yourself, you can sign up. And then our next meeting, our last of the year, is May 13th. Fine Arts and Career Technical Education. We will have Michael Irvin and Jamie Fitzpatrick coming and speaking with us to learn more about that. All right, so, quick budget report. I don't think we spent any money in the last month. It's pretty self-explanatory. And then, as always, we're a 501c3, so we depend on donations to cover operating costs. If you would like to support what we're doing, you can find that information on our website as well. So let's see, and I think that's it. Thank you everyone for coming tonight, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.